Hello, good evening, and good evening. It is Dr. Deborah Jenkins, host of Black Talk Platform. We are talking tonight about Black Lives Matter and Juneteenth and the symbolism surrounding both. What are the benefits? What are the disadvantages for the actual movement to get those who don't yet understand that Black lives indeed matter, and for those who are Black to understand that we are more than a moment and that we are operating under systems that have traditionally put us in a place of disadvantage. But how do we intersect with the movement that is broad spread, globally even, and at the same time not get caught up in the symbolism of even corporations and our white allies even, that they may mean well, but we may lose the true sentiment behind both Black Lives Matter and Juneteenth. So while I'm waiting for my co-host guest tonight, the Pastor Anthony Davis of the Harvest Ministries, to join us, I would like to share with those of you who are tuning in via Facebook Live or YouTube Live at Black DLK Talk DLK platform. That I wrote from Tamara for her newsletter about Juneteenth. While we're waiting for Pastor to join us, let me share with you these observations, my feelings about Juneteenth. Um, and I'm willing to dialogue with anyone on Juneteenth. The piece is titled Juneteenth, chapter 28, verse 3, and Psalm 14, verses 4 through 7. So it's a little long, but bear with me because we are still waiting for Pastor Davis to join us. And here is how it reads. Year's observance of Juneteenth hits differently. On the one hand, we know homage to our ancestors more than 12 years longer in the state of Texas than our enslaved ancestors. And while the Emancipation Proclamation was effective January 1st, 1863, for all slaveholding states, Texas kept its grandfathers and grandmothers enslaved until June 19, 1865. So you see, for many of us, it's too difficult to celebrate January 1st, 1863, because as a unified people, we say we're all free, none are free. For we are hard pressed to celebrate an illegitimate independence whereby those who robbed and killed those native to this land exclaim victory in celebration. This is a story that must continually be recounted through our generations so that our offspring and theirs will observe and celebrate those things that bring us truth and clarity that do not reinforce the lies we lead far too long. In my opening, I mentioned that this year's observance is differently. This is what, on the other hand, it hits differently because the last few weeks, our righteous community has had to mourn with families like Aubrey, Breonna Taylor, Sean Reed, and most recently, George Floyd. Understand this was written prior to the murder of Richard in Atlanta, Georgia. So we have these names, also other names as well that can be added. With the exception of Mr. Aubrey, all were murdered by white police officers, and Aubrey by a white son and father acting as self-appointed community protectors. White supremacy, or as I truly believe, is cloaked in white inferiority. Never in the history of humanity has there been a more hated, despised, and abused people as Black people. And if those of us who live by a biblical code, Pastor Davis is here, but I do not see him. When I see him, I'm going to bring him on in. Why don't I see him? That's technology, everybody. I'm waiting for him to join me. I don't see him. Let me pick back up while I wait to see him. I don't know why I can't see him. He says he's here. I don't see him. Sorry for the interruption. Never in the history of humanity has there been a more hated, despised, and abused people as Black people. If those of us who live by biblical code actually understood our true identity is that of the biblical Israelites, then we would also understand that our global mistreatment was declared by the Father in Deuteronomy 28. We are so accustomed to seeking out the blessings in the word, but we're more adept at overlooking the curses. Most blessings have a corresponding curse. If you do this, then you'll be blessed. If you don't do this, you'll be cursed. Such is the case with our biblical ancestors, and so it is with our more recent ancestors in 1865. And so it is with you and I today. Let me pause for a minute to see if I can bring Pastor Davis into the studio with me. Jason, I might need your help. Hmm? Faster. Can you hear me?
Ah, there we go.
All right.
I've been hanging
Oh
out here
man.
for a while. I said, man, I don't think it would take this long. And I saw you on the live, and I'm backstage. I said something must be wrong. So I'm here.
Oh my. I,
I can
Jason had to tell me to ask you to go. So I'm so sorry. So you can hear me reading my little piece, right? Could you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, let me try to finish that. I was halfway through it, and then we can actually start our conversation if that's okay. We've
Sure.
lost a couple of viewers, but hopefully they'll come back now that they see that we are live again. But we're just gonna kick it tonight. So let me see where I left off. Okay. So in my opening, I mentioned that this year's observance hits differently. I don't want to start way back up there. That's too far. Um, okay. We are so accustomed to seeking out the blessings in the word, but we're more adept at overlooking the curses. Most blessings have a corresponding curse. If you do this, then you'll be blessed. If you don't do this, you'll be cursed. Such is the case with our biblical ancestors, and so it is with our more recent ancestors of 1865, and so it is with us today. The Lord declares that if we fail to follow his commandments and statutes, many curses will come upon us. And that's found in Deuteronomy 28:15. The chapter goes on to list a wide range of curses in the verses that follow. Instead of being blessed when we come and go, we shall be cursed in verse 19. By dropping down to verse 25, it is here where we begin to embody our present day struggles and suffering. It says that the Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies in verse 33. The fruit of thy hand and all thy labor shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and cursed always. We have lived under these and other curses for far longer than 400 years. Our history did not begin in 1619, it began as the chosen people of God. Our very identity and heritage was stolen, and we continue to live under the curse because we haven't recognized who we are and we haven't been faithful to the word of God. We've even been lied to by the church that we adore and taught to forgive our enemies without rebuke and without receiving an apology or request for forgiveness. So says Jesus Christ in Luke chapter 17, verses 3 and 4. So if we've been lied to by the United States government and our trusted faith community, then it's time that we come to terms with the fact that in 2020, we're still waiting for Juneteenth to come. But be not dismayed nor discouraged. God has a word for us during this prolonged wait. There were they, there were they great in fear. God is in the generation of the righteous. Ye have shamed the counsel of the poor, because the Lord is his refuge. Oh, that the salvation of Israel were come out of Zion. When the Lord bringeth back the captivity of his people, Jacob shall rejoice and Israel shall be glad. This is found in Psalm 14, verses 5 through 7. Our true Juneteenth is on the way. And that's how I ended the piece, because I see it quite differently, Pastor David, than many people perhaps may see what we're currently struggling with in this country, throughout the world, and what we're struggling with as faithful people, Bible believing people. I found that I've had to go back. I've had to go back, and I think we've said this before on this platform. I've had to go back and reevaluate some things that I believed and held dear to my heart. But as it relates to Black Lives Matter, that's why we're here tonight, right? Black Lives Matter, Juneteenth, and the symbolism surrounding both. I want to bring you into the conversation and get your take on Black Lives Matter as a movement, the organization, where you find yourself landing, and then we'll talk about Juneteenth, if that's okay.
Sure.
Mhm.
Well, Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag, obviously, and I think for me, it's more. We can look at the organization, but for me, it transcends the organization, because whether one subscribes to what the organization is about or not, the concept of it still stands. That's why I think it's so powerful. That's just my take on it.
Mhm.
That you know, Black lives do matter, and the fact that we are still here after so many events, so many moments where people have been killed. Uh, we can list the names. I think for me, I was thinking about Tamir Rice recently, and I thought
Mhm.
about his death, and I think he was 12 years old at the time in
Mhm.
Ohio, I believe, where a lot of people carry guns, and the
Mhm.
cops came up to him, and then the way they shot him, and I think for me, that hit home for me, and I think it became more than a hashtag. It became something that is deeply philosophical, and I think it's something that Black folk around the nation can gravitate to, and um, I think we see that in terms of the organization. I don't know if I have any opinions, yay or nay, regarding the organization. I think it's a matter of, again, just a force that galvanizes people. I know people may be critical of them or have varying viewpoint. I don't. I don't have any criticism for the organization.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, so the reason why I bring it up as an organization, I think that the movement is valid, and I'm
Mhm.
so glad it's crossing racial barriers, and that others, allies, as we like to call them, are also understanding that they too have a role to play in proclaiming that our lives do matter. Um, I'm able to separate myself out from the organizational structure only because of this. I love how the three who tagged the hashtag years ago came up with it.
Right.
But quite frankly, their union broke apart. I admire Alicia Garza. She's doing great things. I think it's called the Black Lab, or something like that. She's doing.
Yeah.
DeRay McKissick. He's become a super influencer. And the third person, her name escapes me. I don't know if they are all a part of the organization anymore.
Right.
And so I'm skeptical about supporting the organization financially. They are deep pocketed, but for me, like you said, it's not a hard line of separation. But I I jive with the term Black Lives Matter. That part I jive with. The organization, and in fact, there are two organizations. Um, and I don't feel like I need to support either organization in order to make this clarion call to the world to let the world know that Black Lives Matter. If that makes sense.
Perfect sense. Yeah, that's my yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's been a little controversy around that, and so that's why I really want to talk about it. I don't want us to get sidetracked about something that's so critically important by talking about, oh, I don't support the organization. Okay, cool. But do you support the thought that Black lives matter?
Right.
And if you do, we're in tandem. We are moving in the same way together. So let's continue this movement. Let's continue to grow this movement.
Yeah.
You have Japan, you have Germany. I mean, of all places, Germany, whose history is also marred by genocide of whole people, and in a horrible way. But they've experienced one of their largest protests in their history, and it was not based upon their own citizens, but what happened to George Floyd. I think that's powerful. I just find that to be powerful, and something to applaud. What would you say more, Pastor?
I agree with you. I think that, again, that's why I didn't want to go too much into the politic of the organization, and I think sometimes that is a easy way out for people
Yeah.
to scapegoat it or to you know disregard the movement or the idea behind the movement, as you said. And I think it's important that we don't do that and don't allow for that. So I don't even get into these conversations about any controversies or the divisions or people who are with the organization are no longer with whatever, if they moved on. I think, again, it matters. I think it is something that people can rally around globally. I do think we can see things around the world, not just Germany, but even in different parts of Europe, Latin American countries. People are rallying around this idea, and I think it's important that we don't even let the conversation slip into anything other than, yeah. And I think it's something that now I think, and we'll see where we're going with the conversation. But again, sometimes when I see Black Lives Matter painted on the streets in certain cities around the country, I like it and I don't like it. I'm not sure. We'll see. I think one of the points you're making is regarding the symbolism.
Yes.
And we want it to become superficial. We don't want it to become just a hashtag or just the something that people can market, with T-shirts and things of that nature. There really needs to be some substance behind it. And I think the dialogue that I believe that you're trying to have is to make sure that we keep the substance at the forefront. And I think that's critical. And it's important for people like you and people like me to make sure that we keep the dial turned or tuned in at that point, that we don't lose substance. So I think it's important to be critical in our thinking. I think it's important to be able to analyze some things, and to make sure that the conversation stays where it needs to stay. And I think it's not getting too crazy about the organization and not getting caught up in the symbolism of the moment.
Right. Right. I mean, that is where I wanted to go, because I how I post Washington. I thought that was powerful what the mayor did in Washington and Washington, D.C. The reason why, and we may have spoken about this before, but the reason why I thought it was powerful what she did is because they don't have statehood. They don't have proper representation. So to me, that was her act of taking back her city from the federal government, which doesn't really recognize the people in Washington, D.C. So I thought that was powerful. And she basically went into her arsenal and used what she had available. And this was such a powerful demonstration to let the person who had had closed the people off from their house. They called the White House the People's House, but had put the people so far back that they cannot even see into the White House. And that has a dual message there as well. So she commissioned these artists to write Black Lives Matter on the street. Right. She renamed the portion of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Black Lives Matter Way. I love that. This is where it becomes an issue. So then you have other cities, you have other states doing the same. And that's what I thought you were getting at. Let's not water it down by all just painting letters on the street, because it becomes more about symbolic action rather than undoing some things should never have existed and that are still plaguing the same Black lives that we're painting on the street and saying they matter. So I was checked by a couple of educators because they're in this classroom with their students all the time, and they see their vulnerability, their insecurity, and they felt that by the children going down these blocks that have now Black Lives Matter painted on them, they would feel a sense of self-empowerment. So I couldn't really argue with that either, but I caution against over applauding something when there's still so much work left to be done. Would you weigh in on that, please?
I think, yeah, some of the points that I was making earlier, that for a lot of white people, sympathetic whites, or those who will classify themselves as liberal, in their conscience, they could be made to feel more comfortable by a hashtag or some painting in the middle of the street that can make people feel better. And I think, again, white supremacy is the primary problem that we have in America. That's the biggest issue. and white privilege is the biggest, to me, in the church, is the biggest heresy in the church, let's say.
Yes.
And so we have to really get with it. I mean, there's some serious problems that need to be undone, or dealt with. And BLM is nice, but there's some things that have to be. I mean, I always say that when you think about wealth disparities in the nation, and you think about how did we get here, right? And I often cite things like the Federal Housing Act of 1934, and you're in history, you know this stuff. And from 1934 to 1968, the Federal Housing Act had these subsidized loans given to people to be able to purchase these houses all around the country, and Black folks weren't able to participate in this and buy homes and be able to build wealth, but the federal government subsidized this, and all these white folks were able to do that for a long time. So many of our people that we may know, who we may make as much money as, let's say, we may, at a certain point, our incomes may match, but we don't have the generational wealth because they've been able to take advantage of this and of buying houses back during that time, and their wealth has grown exponentially. Now they have this, the surplus of money that they've invested in their homes, and the equity of the homes has increased, and they can pass it on. So even though our incomes may come up, the point of the matter is that we have not built wealth and been able to take advantage of that opportunity because we were redlined out of it, let's say, right? So that's a policy, right? That's a policy, a public policy that set us back, right? Among other things. That's just one example of a public policy that somebody has benefited from. And now there's a disparity in terms of wealth. So I have friends who are the same age, we may make the same money, but they're living far better than I am, let's say. Right? And so you're not starting from the same place. But now that same friend, that same white friend, might feel good in their own self because, hey, I'm hashtagging Black Lives Matter. I'm for the movement. I feel good. I'm with you. But brother, you're still taking advantage of, your family was able to take advantage of something that my family could not. And you're far ahead of me. It's not about you just raising a fist and hashtag. We have to undo the situation that puts you in a far better position than it put me and my family for several years, if several generations, right? We have to talk about that. We've got to talk about issues. I posted recently on Facebook the headstones of my family. I talked about my great-great-grandmother. She's born in, I think, 1839, and grandfather born in 1861. My grandfather was born in 1890, right? So these are people, my mother's father was born in 1890, and his father and his grandmother were born in slavery, right? So we're not talking about something that was a long time ago. We're talking about something that was within eyesight because I knew my grandfather, right? Before I was 13 and I knew him, right? And we can talk about these things. This is not something that's far removed. So here's a man, I believe he was a sharecropper. He managed to do okay, but for a long time he was held back, right? He had 13 children, I believe, and the life that somebody else would have been able to live, he was not able to live, right? And able to pass on. Now he did pretty decent, all things considered. But if he had a level playing field,
right,
what would he have been able to pass on to his children and to his children, his grandchildren, so on and so forth? But the reality is that hasn't happened. And so we have to understand that if my ancestors are that closely related to slavery and just not that far removed from it, these are advantages or disadvantages that I've had compared to my white counterparts. And again, so when we talk about reparations, we talk about different things to try to even things up. That's the issue, right? When we talk about Black Lives Matter, we have to talk about the fact that we need to even these things up. Last point I'm going to make is even when it comes to policing, right? We know that white folks use marijuana or drugs at the same rate that Black folks use. We know this. This is facts. But the difference is the way we're policed. I'm 4 times more likely to be arrested for possessing the same things that they would in terms of drugs, right? and do more time, be listed as a felon. And that affects me in so many ways that I have no recourse but to be really in a life of crime, because once I'm labeled a felon, it sets me back, right?
Yeah.
But I'm doing the same thing in engaging in drugs at the same rate as my white counterpart, but they don't get the same consequences. And I've said multiple times, I'm a hip hop fan. I go to hip hop concerts all the time. And I've to concerts and I've seen white kids who are the predominant part of the audience, right? They're there, man, they light up. Man, they light it up at these concerts, right? And sometimes I get funny and I say loudly to them, I said, man, it must feel really good to do all these drugs and never have to worry about being arrested, never have to worry about being labeled or being a felon or having to deal with the things that we have to deal with when it comes to that, right? And being set back on so many levels as felons, not being able to vote, public housing, all the things that we know as people who do this work. So the point is that there's some real disparities, some real issues, some real systemic aspects of white supremacy that holds us back. And these are going to be very tough conversations with our white counterparts, right? And that's where the conversation has to go, to that hard part. And it's not enough to just hashtag. We have to undo a lot of systemic things. I was a little long-winded, but I hope.
No. I'm really glad that you got that out. It's Quadri's over here laughing. He's viewing with us, and it was when you, Quadri, and Dawn and I were on a few weeks back that I became a Facebook friend with one of Quadri's actual friends, and I had mentioned Tim Wise in that discussion, and he was like, "Listen, he's this, he's that," the mutual friend, right? And I understand, and so this man, he's an ally, a white ally, I believe, from what I've come to know of him so far. But his strong feelings about Tim Wise, and I said during that broadcast that Tim Wise has been an anti-racist speaker for many years. Yes, he's opportunistic, but I believe that it's really pushed this brother to a point. Even because I brought Tim's name up to make his own witness, anti-racist witness, that much stronger. I don't know him personally, but just what I've seen, to separate himself out. And I think that's a part of the going deeper in the discussion. Someone posted an article today. A man had written saying that my wife is Black, my son is biracial, I'm white, and I find that I have a lot of white supremacy tendencies. So I read the article. At first, I just said, why did she marry him? She had to have known it. But the person who posted it, he said the article is really, good. So I went and read it. And this is the example the father put up. He said around 2007, when he moved to Boston, a young lady had been murdered in a bad neighborhood by some gang members. I think it's in Dorchester, Massachusetts. And he followed it for like a week. But because of her name, he just assumed that, well, why was she over there? She got herself into this trouble because she's hanging out with gang members. Little did he know, because he had never seen her face, he assumed she was a Black woman. But when he found out she was a white woman, he had to face his own white supremacy. And I think that is those are the conversations you're talking about need to be had. Because when we talk about reparations, for me, if my son, he's really good at depicting and illustrating all that happened to our ancestors during the transatlantic slavery. We know that our grandmothers had to nurse white babies with their milk that was reserved for their own children. We know that Black men were buck broken. They were castrated. Their wives were raped in front of them. They were raped in front of their wives. So when we discuss reparations, money could never be sufficient, because their lives were taken from them. Their lives were ruined. And what we have inherited is the mental anguish that has passed down through the bloodstream from our ancestors. So while, yeah, sure, you and I could probably do pretty well as Robert, the founder of BET, has come out and he's now joined the reparation movement. He's run the numbers and he's saying that we should all get $300,000 or something like that. You and I, because we manage our lives well, we could make a lot out of that. A lot of our brothers and sisters could not, because they still are in more impoverished situations than you and I. We're just talking to you and I. And their thought of progress, their thoughts of many of their thoughts of progress, their thoughts of having achieved a certain status is wrapped up in things, gold, diamonds, cars, and houses. Whereas you and I would probably be doing what the Bible says, setting up a legacy for out to the fourth generation. So money could never atone for what happened to our ancestors. And I think that has to be a part of the discussion when we are deconstructing white supremacy. And I think we have to do a good job in the church. And we know that there will be those who will also reject, this conversation within the church. I do believe the civil rights movement, which our parents were probably a part of in some way. I know mine were. Yours may be a little younger than mine. But I think where the failure of the civil rights movement was in the words that were chosen. And there's a very important word. It should have never, in my opinion, have been equality. It should have always been, as you spoke about when you talked about your white counterpart, equity. And that's something that this nation is not willing to think about, because I feel that if equity had been the push, many more of us would be dead right now than there have been murders of those who look like you and I. So talk about Juneteenth. You heard my long spiel about Juneteenth, and how did you feel about Juneteenth? We saw that 104 people were shot over the Juneteenth holiday in Chicago, and I believe 14 were murdered. 14 of that 104 were murdered. So there's a sense of celebration. And my son and I, again, we were talking about it today, and we don't feel that there's a whole lot to celebrate. And I might be out on a limb by myself pretty much, but because I'm sure our ancestors who got the word in June 19th, 1865 were like, woohoo, we are no longer beholden to them. But I wonder if there was true celebration. And so what is your take on that, Pastor David?
That's a very good question. And again, that's a question with many that we have to unpack, and it's layered. And it's something that, I think in the initial stage of being of Juneteenth, I got the word on Thursday, I don't know, late Thursday, and my wife has got the kids in the back. If you hear noise, she's just keeping the kids occupied. I got word Thursday late afternoon that the governor was going to put this in executive order in New York that we would celebrate Juneteenth, make it a holiday for the state. And I got Friday off, and I was happy to hear that because of the fact that it's an acknowledgement. I think we're in a moment where people are acknowledging certain things. And again, there's reason to feel optimistic. And we talk about Black Lives Matter and that idea. And I think there's some good things to feel good about. I think it's good to feel good about Juneteenth and it working its way in people's consciousness. But again, we don't want to get too swayed by the symbolism of things. And is it truly something to celebrate? I think time will tell. I think it's good that we acknowledge the country's history. And I think it's good to, in some way, to identify with those, let's say in Texas, that got the word that they've been made free. I want to, in some way, feel what they may have felt. I want to identify with them. Mm-hmm. I think that's something to that. I've often thought about that, but I think in this moment, it gave me an opportunity to really digest it and think about it and try to, again, feel what they felt. And I'm big on that, trying to feel what their ancestors have felt. But again, I don't want to slide down a slope where it becomes just a day off.
Right.
If it doesn't lead to the things that we're talking about that are transformational,
Right.
and that leads to, and again, I really don't care about people's dispositions or their heart. And I think sometimes I'll say this, we talked about the civil rights movement, the mistake of the civil rights movement. I don't know if it's a mistake. It's just a point of view that I have. I think sometimes we're trying to change people's hearts, attitudes. And so a lot of things that we do is trying to, shift things and get people to see things differently. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing to affect people's hearts. But I think for me, I just want people to leave me alone and let me live and let me seek equity, right? So I just don't want. I don't care if you like me. I don't care if you could think of me whatever you want in a prejudicial sense.
Sure.
You're free to be prejudiced. You're free to feel. You can think out in your mind that I'm a monkey. I don't care.
Right.
What I do care is that you let me live in equity and to pursue it.
Right.
To let my family pursue it, to let my children pursue it. Like that's all I care about. And so I think again the fact that these things have come to pass again with Juneteenth and everything that comes with it, if we let it simply become a day off, something that we just kind of say, hey, we got our Juneteenth and we're happy about that. It's like Black History Month in February. It could just delve into something that every year comes around and it becomes something superficial. Or we could look at the moment as a way to critically analyze some things and challenge some things. And I think that's why what you're doing with your work here and in general is important, because it's challenging us to think and to keep substance on the table. And my thoughts.
No, I don't disagree with any of it. And I think I had seen you post about just leave me alone. Just leave me alone. And I feel that way too. So listen, right? I was looking at Jeremiah 29:11 that everybody loves. But then I said, let me read chapter 28. Let me read what comes before verse 11. And so God tells Jeremiah to tell the people, while you're in your captivity, build your houses, marry, have children, grow your farms, grow your gardens, seek the peace of the city. That's the problem.
Yeah.
We've done all of that. As you started earlier, you stated how, and I always like link it back to when our World War II veterans, Black veterans, came back, and they were unable to access funds to purchase homes, to purchase land. That has always the redlining you were talking about. Then also when you talked about your great grandparents and your grandfather, knowing him, he was born in 1890. My friend Tandra Burkett, very good friend, we were on a live last night on her Mental Health Mondays. We were talking about white racism within Christianity and how we've been duped and all of that stuff. It was a good one, but we were having challenges with technology. But a couple of weeks ago during one of her lives, she said, my father is 80 something, I believe she said. Remember, it's only been 150 years, basically. 150 years, which means that he knew his parents and grandparents, and they were enslaved. We've not come that far from slavery. And I think that the white world wants us to, as they always say, forget about that. Why are you going back? Because it was yesterday.
It was yesterday.
It was yesterday. My mother will be 80 if God spares life. Same scenario. She was talking to my son, Jason, Jason. She was talking to Jason and I 2 weeks ago about her grandmother or her great grandmother? Her grandmother, right? And this is so funny, especially for any of my Caribbean friends. You all know I was born in Montgomery, Alabama, but my mother told us that her grandmother, who was like partially Native American, but very dark, right? Very dark and African American, we know that story as well. But my grandmother was a sharecropper. Like many of those who were no longer enslaved, they stayed on the farm as sharecroppers. That my grandmother would take goats. She was the goat herder, I guess, or whatever they called them. And she would just, people come to her, Callie, to get their goats for their meal. And she just slit the necks of the goats right in front of her and anyone else. And I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Mommy, you never served us goats growing up. I had to come to New York and become Caribbean to get goat. But it was always a part of me. But she was, my mother's only 80, but she remembers this vividly from her grandmother. And so when we're being told to get over it, get beyond it, we have living relatives, our parents even, right, who are able to tell us these vivid stories. We are not getting over it. We're not going that far ahead because it wasn't that long ago. And so, like you, even in our pursuit of doing what the word tells us to do, we are stuck. You know, I remember my husband started his job. We were we when we conceived our son, who's our oldest, we knew that the apartment that we were living in was too small. We needed something more. So we always avoided our community because I worked with so many people and I didn't want to see them. But that didn't make any sense, right? When
Hmm.
he and his coworker both started at the same time, this goes to your story. His friend, who's Caucasian, was able to go to his parents, and so was his wife, and get a loan from them to purchase a home in Upper Westchester County. We had to save up for 6 months to purchase this apartment so that we wouldn't have to take a mortgage and we only have to pay our monthly charges. We didn't have family that we can ask for a loan because that has been the story of African Americans. Even though we're upwardly mobile, some people may call you and I uppity because we have advanced in our careers and in our academic pursuits, but we're not because it doesn't really matter. If we live here or if somebody lives on Webster Avenue, or Washington Avenue, it really doesn't matter because once we walk through the doors of any bank, all they see is our color. So we're not even able to pursue biblically while we're in captivity the
Yep.
things that God has told us to try to pursue. And so that goes back to my equity statement. I think you make a valid point that when we get with our allies, we have to have these very genuine and difficult conversations with one another. And if that means that they need to cry out of embarrassment, we'll leave space for them. But guess what? I'm not willing to do is cry along with them. Why? Because we've been crying all our lives, and I can't, but I will give them the space to cry. Yesterday, a pastor and I, we were on a call with the NYPD. She and I, she's African American. She and I, another African American female pastor, and one Caucasian female pastor. We were the most vocal in terms of Black Lives Matter type speak, while others have, in my opinion, become too comfortable doing this critical work along with the police department to let them know they're too comfortable placating to people that we are paying as taxpayers to do a job of serving and protecting, while these four lone voices of women are willing to do the heavy lift and say, look, we're going to hold you accountable because you took the job. You can't be afraid of everything as law enforcement officers. And if that is the case, then you need to consider another profession. If everything that a Black person does scares you. And that's why Black Lives Matter is so important to me. I think that's why we have to keep protesting. I think that's why we have to continue to keep this message before the world that you're no longer going to just kill us because you see us. You're going to take the same time and care as you would with our white counterparts when you see us and not take our lives. Pastor.
And I'm so glad you went down that direction because I think that's the key is the fact that at the end of the day, it becomes a matter of this white supremacy allows uh, white people to discard you like trash. It's,
Right.
it's, that's really the facts that um, I've gone back to look at some of the videos of people of the shootings of Black people, all the names that we know, right? I've gone back to look at some of those instances, and I realized, man, how could this happen? How could someone look at you if your hands are up or you're being stopped and complying, and you're still being shot, right? What kind of psyche does that, right? What kind of person does that? And I went back and I looked. I have a book, a couple of books. I have 100 Years of Lynching. That's one book, and I have another book that gives a pictorial history of lynchings in America. I think when George Floyd died, I posted some of the photos of this book of the lynchings, and you would see white Americans having a picnic with their children and their families, and it's an event to burn a Black person, to hang them. And it was, I mean, a ton of them. And what Facebook would do was censor my pictures or put a cover. They put the cover because the content is too violent. Okay. But a lot of violent stuff that they didn't do that for, that, you know. But when it comes to this, they put the censoring up in the cover. But I wanted to post these things to show that, again, this dehumanizing of Black life is something that's really part of the psyche of America. So when white folks talk about, like, oh, just get over it, there's a cognitive dissonance. They don't want to deal with it, right? Right. It's not that it's too far back. It's that they don't care to deal with it. They want you to forget it. To them, you don't matter. Your feelings, your trauma that you deal with psychologically, what does that matter to them, right? Right. The inequities that you face, what does that matter to them? It doesn't mean anything. The fact that you die, it doesn't matter to them. The fact that this man could be on this man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, it's so irrational. It's so ridiculous. It's so dehumanizing. They don't want to deal with it. So a lot of my white friends are silent. They're just silent, and they don't have, and they're silent not because their silence is they're complicit, and they realize this. They're complicit. And I'll say it like this. I remember at my old job, a lot of my white counterparts were getting these promotions, significant promotion. I'm talking about like big money, young white people getting well into the six figures, right? Well into the six figures. And I had my boss, she's a white woman. I love her to death. Me and her are very, very good friends. And I view her as family, but you know, she has benefited, man. And when I said to her, I had spoken to her about the fact that so many of our counterparts, our colleagues, were getting these increases and these raises and these promotions. She said to me, honestly, she said, listen, I can't say anything about that because I benefited from that myself. Wow. She said, listen, and she realizes that she's benefited, but this is the thing that she says in her mind, and I love it to death, but in her mind, she believes that even though she was privileged with this opportunity, within a short period of time, within a 4 or 5 year period, her salary increased about $100,000. That just give you some idea, right? Understand? In her mind, her rationale was that she was privileged to get it, but she's going to work hard in the aftermath. Like, she deserves it because she's going to work hard, and her hard work will warrant her having the privilege that she has received. That's in her mind. So she thinks, yes, it's unfair that I've gotten something I probably didn't earn. And it was a privilege factor that she knows I wouldn't get this, or other people of color wouldn't get this. She knows she got it for that particular reason. She can admit that to some extent, but in her mind, how she rationalizes it is that she is going to work hard. And what she always did was, because most of her direct reports were people of color, including myself. And the way she talked about us was as if we didn't work hard. Like like,
Not like her.
right, not like her. So again, there's this cognitive dissonance. Like she can't seem to put it together. So she did admit she was able to admit, yes, I'm privileged from this, but in her mind, there was a justification for it because of her character, which she wasn't just going to be lazy in the position. She was really going to work hard. So I say that to say that these people, that really becomes the issue, right? That becomes the issue, and I guess, to make it all come full circle, she would be the kind of person, she would call me in the midst of a lot of the things that have happened and make sure I'm okay and sympathize and empathize to some extent with me. But the hashtag or the symbolism would be something she would gravitate to, but to really deal with what she has benefited from, she would never do that. And I think that we have to challenge that because I don't know, white supremacy has psychologically ravaged Black folk. And I just think that the reason why there's such energy the way there is with this generation is because this thing is traumatic.
Well, there's a question.
Yeah.
The statements about your former boss, supervisor. It is from our friend, Minister Quadri Harris, to you.
Yeah.
I'm reading it from his post. How,
Yeah.
Anthony Davis, Pastor Davis, how do you maintain a friendship with a person to the point where you consider them family after what you've described? I believe he's saying.
That's a good question, because we all have family that we don't agree with, right? I have family that does some crazy things and things that I don't like, but every relationship is complicated. Every relationship has these layers to it. There's some redeeming quality clearly that would allow me to connect with her on some level, right? Mm-hmm. We all have friends, people that we associate with, those who are our blood relatives that we maintain these relationships with. Now, I love her to death, but mm-hmm. an area that we have problems with. But what I will say is that I have the tough conversations with her.
Okay.
I don't sugarcoat it. I come down her block, and she likes that. Now, has it transformed her holistically? No. Has it moved the dial some? Yes, because she's not the same person that she was 10, 12 years ago. She's a different person. Okay. Is it enough for to satisfy me? No. It's a lot of work to do. But the reason why I even bring her up is that's the example of the point I was trying to make about these tough conversations and moving the consciousness of the nation where it needs to go. Because again, I just think that a lot of us are really, we have a lot of people coming up who are millennials, and Cadre may be one, right? They're not making the kind of money that I was able to make, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know what we call we're not baby boomers, we're Generation X. We were the last generation to kind of catch that, but we're doing okay, where our education and our salaries may match. Mm-hmm. This generation is not feeling that, and they're disappointed, and they're angry, and they have a right to be, and they're dealing with going to school, pursuing the American dream, taking out all these loans, and now they're saddled with all this debt, and there's no opportunity for them, right? And now they're facing police brutality in addition, and the system and the wealth inequalities, all the things that our generation really didn't tackle the way we needed to tackle it, and they have to now radically do what we didn't do, right? But they're dealing with trauma and stress that I don't think a lot of our generation understands.
Right.
And so I've moved from being anti-millennial, I've said this in recent Facebook posts, to actually appreciating this generation and realizing this is one of the greatest generations I've seen, because they are really coming of age intellectually, and coming of age in terms of morality,
Right.
challenging the status quo.
You know, I have to say thank you for responding to that. And my sister, who you also know, Juanita Presley, who's a deacon at Faith at Work, says to you, thanks for sharing how to maintain a relationship with someone white who's not always on the same page. And so we do say thank you. But let me tell you, I love this generation. I love them. And I think I said this to you and Quadri a few years ago when we did a gathering over at Dreiser, after, who was it? Philando Castile was murdered, I believe, or at some point. I feel like, unlike our generation, the baby boomers, you know, they have this status and they never really appreciated us like you and I have grown to appreciate the millennials. And not all of the Generation Xers appreciate the millennials. We basically came out of college, did what we had been prescribed to do with college education, go and get the job, start the life. They are willing, because they are strapped with all of these loans, they're willing to just let everybody know how they feel. They need somebody like you and I to just give them that space, give them access to the relationships we formed over the years, so that they'll have an opportunity to keep on speaking and doing things as unprescribed as they do them. And we can provide cover for them on the back end. I'm so excited about them. Does that mean I agree with them all the time? No. But I try to understand that they don't have to do it the way we did it. They certainly don't have to do it the way our predecessors did it. But there needs to be, they need to be able to rely on us to give them the space to at least try to do it. And even if they make mistakes, be able to pick them back up and put them back on that road. We don't want them off that road, because it is because of them that everybody is now taking notice of Black lives that matter incredibly. I'm so proud of them. And I don't ask them to do it the way we did it. I just ask them to not go it alone to the point where you get yourself in irreparable danger or cause harm to yourself or your family and friends. Call on us. See how we can help, because we're here to help. And it's time to pass the baton. And we ain't old, Pastor Davis. We are not old. So we
Yeah.
have to prepare for the mantle to be passed on. And a lot of people fear that. We see it all the time in the church. We're not ready to move aside and allow the new blood to come in, even if it doesn't sound or flow the way we flow. But I am willing to do that, and I think it's important that they know that we support them. I did want to say one more thing, Pastor. I'm trying to get us to the point where you weren't on and I was reading. If we can get about 5 to 6 more minutes, is that okay with you? We're
Sure.
over. I did want to ask you about this new initiative that I told you about a few weeks ago. After we in our community tried to keep some young people from getting arrested because they were coming up here to loot in our community, Minister Quadri, Pastor Kaji, myself, Pastor Frank, my son Jason, some other community members. We went out there, stood in front of McDonald's. We saw about 100, 150 people. We spoke to about 50 kids. We were able to get about 4 to go back. I think those are decent numbers. But when people are intent on doing wrong, they're gonna do it, you know.
Yeah.
So what I thought of, and this is something that I want to share with the community, and I hope others will share, is starting a rapid response team called Uncode. Uncode meaning that we give them directives. These are the things you're going to respond to. You're going to respond to both police brutality against us and crimes that we commit against one another in the community. So I brought this up to say I am recruiting for about 20 Black and Latino males ages 18 and above. We are going to raise funds because we're not sending people out on the streets and all times of night without giving them a stipend and transportation, safe transportation. So I don't believe in that anyway. Free never got us anything because we're still not free. I was on, I said that to say, I was on a forum, a community town hall the other night, because every time we talk about we talk about police violence against Black bodies, there are always these good people, they're usually Black, who want to say, well, what about Black on Black crime? Listen, I know who's doing the work in New York, in all five boroughs. And it's usually not the people who are saying, well, what about Black on Black crime? They're not the ones doing the work, but they're always the people who want to bring it up and have these parallel discussions, and it really annoys me. So the community town hall leader, he left it open for any of these people to come onto the forum, not anybody. No one came on. There were crickets. Why? Because the credible witnesses that are out there, they're actually doing the work. We're talking about getting out on the streets when we hear within 24 hours and going out there and trying to what is it, de-escalate the situation between the community and the cops, between the community and the community. These people, it so annoys me because they'll bring out cameras, don't even know the names of the people, but just to say that they've done something. Really, what have you done if we're still killing each other? And there are great, credible organizations and individuals in community who are doing the work. I'm gonna let you end on that, and I'll tee it up for next week. But come on, talk to me about that, Pastor Davis, please.
Okay, so you said a lot there. So regarding what you're starting, the initiative that you're starting, I'm all for that. Whatever you need us to do for that, we are on board.
Thank you.
If it's a stipend, we'll see what we can do. We may be able to help contribute to that. I think, that's proactive, and I think it taps into the strengths of this. When you talk about the millennial group or that 18 and up, to be able to start to in an organized fashion, supported by the likes of us, I think that's very important to do. What was the other part of the last part of your point there?
Yes, about what is your take on the people who like to have these parallel discussions?
Yes.
We're trying to, as you say, stay focused on the imminent threat.
Yeah. So let me go. Yeah. So I hate the parallel conversation, and it gets exhausting because Black on Black crime is something that has declined so much the last 40 years. Like I'm saying it's not an issue. I'm not saying that's not a disproportionate amount of violence within our community, but that is tied to white supremacy. And what I mean by that is, say that when I look at Native American culture, the Native Americans have 3 times the violent crime of the national average. Rape is 10 times the national average. Suicide 10 times the national average. Alcohol abuse, drug abuse is very high within their community, right? If you just Google violence within the Native American community, crime, it's high. People go missing, women are abused, physically assaulted, tremendous levels of violent crime, but it's all tied to them being relegated to reservations and marginalized, right? So anytime you have a marginalized community, you're going to have crime, right? I love, people know, if you follow me on Facebook, I love Kendrick Lamar, the hip hop artist, because he talks about Compton and life in the hood, right? And what it does to people when there's no opportunity, when there's nothing there, there's no education. And so he had an album called Good Kid, Mad City, right? So when you're a good kid, but you're growing up in a mad city, a city where there's no opportunity, you're policed a certain kind of way, there's income disparities, all the things that we're talking about, it feeds into a life many times of violence and of a lot of things that are negative, that could lead to a disproportionate level of homicides within our communities and violent crime. I'm not saying that's not a problem. It's a problem. We have to deal with it, but we've always been dealing with it. But that issue is tied to white supremacy. So I say that I think about myself. I think in terms of watching television, the imagery of Black life on television. You're never the hero. You're never anybody good. The hero is always the white person. The narrative is always that they are they fought for freedom and you're nothing. And so this stuff feeds in your psyche. When we talk about religion, we talk about Jesus. And I said this to somebody. I said, when you pray or when you think about Jesus, what do you think about in your mind? Who do you see in your mind? When you study about King David in Israel, what do you see in your mind when you try to imagine these things? And I said, hey, I'm 49 years old, right? I'm almost 50 years old. Undergrad was Black Studies major in undergrad. Most of my graduate work is in African history and Black American Christianity, right? With all of that, I still wrestle with the imagery in my mind. So if I have this imagery of this sense of white supremacy, what does it do to me psychologically, right? Well, it troubles me, it bothers me, it does certain things to me negatively, but at least I have the tools to be able to kind of combat it. But what if I don't have the tools, right? And I see myself as less than, if I see myself as inferior, if I don't have self-respect, right? And if I don't have respect for myself, how will I respect other people? So again, imagery, how our communities are dealt with affects us psychologically. And so again, it may lead to violence, right? So the issue is not Black on Black crime. That is a symptom of a larger problem. The larger problem is white supremacy. And it's exhausting, but we have to create space to have that apologetic. So we need people that can address that. I said to my brother who earned his doctorate, and he's doing this kind of work we're talking about. He's trying to create what he calls the counter narrative when it comes to, because he did a lot of studies on critical race theory, right? So he's trying to the counter narrative and the resources that we need to make these arguments related to Black on Black crime. So he's putting this stuff together. He's putting me onto things, but he would love to create the content for us to be able to deal with that issue and train people to deal with that issue from an apologetic point of view, meaning a defense point of view, articulating these points so that people like us don't have to worry about that. We have those apologists to do that. We can focus on the ground level work. And I think that's what's needed. We need people to put those points together, because I don't know about you, I just get tired of the parallel.
I do too. I'm exhausted. I tell you, look, and I don't make any apology for saying, look, y'all deal with that. When you come to me, okay, I will hear you out, but I'm not going to bring out any tissues for you. Bring your own. I'm not going to take time for that, because I still have a life, this one person, plus I'm responsible for other lives. Look, it's too much. You've been here as long as I've been here. Deal with your stuff. I wanted to share 2 comments as a result of this conversation. My friend, and I hope you all will meet one day, Minister Tandra Burkett. She is the co-founder of the Harlem Fashion Week. That is the Harlem Fashion Week, everybody. I'm doing a shameless plug for them because they do it perfectly in all the glory that Blackness brings. I mean, she asked me that, but she did say the term Black on Black crime is a misnomer. That is true. And she also said, to your point, every ethnic group or race commits crimes against itself because of proximity. And we do. And I'm concerned. I'm trying to get this Uncode Rapid Response Team up quickly. And I have to give you more information so you can help, because you said you would. Because our young people are going to be without jobs this summer. So this is the proximity that she's talking about. We have to give them something, even if that means we're just training them for the 6 weeks they get paid to be prepared to respond to these issues. After the 6 weeks, we have to do something to keep them engaged, because teeth and tongue fall out. That's what my dad taught me. And our brother, Minister Yoram Keith Rodriguez, to your point, said Chains in Images of Psychological Slavery is an excellent book. I'm not familiar with that, but we're going to look for it, Minister Rodriguez. Thank you so much. And he says, The Mugging of Black America, by Earl Afari Hutchinson. He has a great podcast too. And I have a book by him, but it's not The Mugging of Black America. So you've given me a good recommendation. He said he makes an excellent defense against the Black on Black crime argument. So maybe we'll get that, have a book study right here bring Minister Rodriguez on and bring Tandra on, and we can have a nice little round table. If you, I know you oblige me so often. If Pastor Andre don't kill me the next time she see me, but tell her I said happy anniversary a day late.
Absolutely.
I'll have you. We can all come back and do this together. So Tandra is saying, what do we call it when white people kill white people? White on white crime. That's what they do. Um, Oh, and she's also agreeing to help with the rapid response team. That's what we need. We need us to do this together because you can't do everything in Section 5, and I can't do everything in whatever section my church is located in. And we're all so busy. But when we come together to say we're going to help each other because we know ultimately it's going to help our community, that's how we begin to win. Let me see if there are any other comments before we shut it down. Pastor Davis, I thank you so much for always being willing and available when you can to come on here with me and we discuss issues of the moment. Sadly, it's been a lot of death that we've been talking about, but we believe that this is more than a moment. The Black Lives Matter movement is here. And we are responsible to just keep helping young people do what they do, push it out. And those of us, I'm sort of tired of all the marching myself. I'm tired, I'm tired, I'm tired. But I am so happy to support others in doing that work. And if God leads me, I will get back out there as well. Tandra has been going out, and other friends, Pastor Kimberly Marbury, right down in Harlem, they've been doing the thing, and many people. We're not all called to do the same thing at the same time, but we do what we can when we can. I'm going to ask anyone who is interested in helping us put together the rapid response team. We want to start with 20 young men so that we can look like power when we come into these situations. Everybody knows about the fireworks. We'd be sending them out right now. Say, what y'all doing out there? You know, even though we believe that there's been some infiltration from outsiders to make us look bad by dumping fireworks in our communities. People aren't working right now. Everybody's on a shutdown. Who's got money to throw at fireworks, not the loud fireworks that we're hearing? So we passed that information on to the NYPD, and they said that they would check it out because just like they threw guns in our communities, just like they threw crack and heroin in our community, I don't believe we're just doing this on our own. I really don't. But that is certainly a discussion for another time. Pastor Davis, we want to thank you. Do you need to share anything about what's going on at Harvest before we shut it down?
No, I mean, we're just trying to for us, we keep things very low profile. And what I mean by that, not that we're not doing anything, it's just that in this day and time, I'm happy being a pastor. I'm happy feeding my flock, and to the point where we're talking about the millennials, and I want to make this sort of public, man. I am looking to support this new generation of leadership to the point where I'm looking for a successor.
All right now.
And I'm just saying that at some point I would love to engage this new generation. And I just got to put it out to use this opportunity to say, hey, young preachers out there that want, opportunity to grow and to do this work and to take this, what we're talking about, to the next level. I'm open to that because I don't want to do what the prior generation did to me, where you had to wait so long to have opportunity to lead. And let's not do that to this generation. Let's give them the platform.
That's right. I think that's so powerful. And I'm going to share this video out on your page so that others will see it. And it's not, be clear, Pastor Davis is not saying I'm retiring tomorrow. He is just willing to prepare someone else while he's in his youth to take over for him. We're not trying to do this for the rest of our lives. I believe it is for everyone to prepare another to come behind them. And when you hold on for too long, you lose something, and you've not prepared the next generation to deal with what comes next. And I'm so glad to have a partner in ministry who sees that these young people have something that even we didn't have, and we were called radical. So I'm excited for them. I don't know what the topic is going to be next week, everybody, but I do hope you continue to tune in to Black Talk platform. BLK, TLK, platform, YouTube. Please go and subscribe. I'm not trying to monetize. I just want people who are not my personal friends to be able to view our conversation when we have it, and we're having it every week. I don't know how many times Pastor Davis has been on with me, but I'm not above asking him on Thursday, hey, you want to come on next week? Because we know something is going to jump off. We have elections in 6 states. We have a contentious one in our congressional district right here where we are between Elliot Engel, the incumbent, and the upstart, who has been a community principal, Jamal Bowman. It's going to be interesting to see how that election works out. Pastor, are we bookmarking this for next week to talk about? And
We
then
can do that. We can do that.
about that.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna bookmark this so y'all come back on next Tuesday. We're gonna talk about Bowman Engel. We're gonna talk about AOC and how the wicked Republican Party put up a so-called Democrat who's really a Republican to run against her. And next week we shall know how that turned out for her. And then in Louisville, we have two candidates going up against Mitch McConnell in the Democratic primary. We have a brother whose name was misspelled on the ballot. My cousin went to vote this morning, and her friend's ballot had his name correct, and his was on hers. It was incorrect. They only had one polling site for 600,000 people. This is in Louisville, Kentucky, where the officers who murdered Breonna Taylor have still not been arrested. It will be interesting to see if Amy McGrath or Christopher Brooks, I believe his name is, who came out the victor to face Mitch McConnell in the general election in November. So come on back next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Black Talk platform. Pastor Davis and I will be here front and center. God bless you all. We thank you for tuning in. See you next week. God bless. All right. Pastor. Oh, he's gone.